And so with the Slam Box, with the Auto Fusion series, with the 1968 Ford F350 dropping onto a 2000 Lincoln Towncar chassis, power plant, wheels, suspension, firewall, with all of that stuff, my main goal is today is I want to prep the cab so that way we can drop it on this platform for the final time. And believe it or not, this does require quite a bit of work.
And now, you're watching the Happy Birthday Grimace I Just Drank Some of Your Milkshake channel of YouTube. Welcome to BodeVision.
Hey, so what is up and welcome, and thank you so much for joining me yet again on another video. So with the cab, the first thing that we want to do, and I'm just going to knock it out relatively quickly, is in this bottom corner right here we have quite a bit of rust, and it's cancer rust, it's rot. A lot of the metal is not existent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to chase that rot back as far as I need to chase it, so that way I have a full solid metal perimeter. Now I don't want to go too far, but I want to go right where it's 100% solid. So I'm going to get that cut out, then quickly whip up some patch panels to make it fit seamless and look as good as I can possibly make it with my skill level. Now keep in mind, this could be perfect or it could be a lot less perfect, but it's gonna be somewhere in the middle. Alright, so as of right now we have this little patch made, and I just threw some primer on it so that way it wouldn't rust, and I think that's going to pass. It's going to be just fine. We're going to have a seal come around and cover all of that stuff, and with it being in primer, it's not going to rust. We also have that little patch right down there, so that looks pretty good. Now another major problem that I was seeing for this was I had to cut out a lot of the structure underneath here, and if you can see in that area where the sun is coming through, that's just going to allow water to drain onto the dash or somewhere on the firewall of the actual Lincoln Towncar. So what I need to do is I need to make sure I preserve all this clearance that I had to make, but I still need to make sure water can't drain in here. The water needs somewhere to go. So I think I'm going to put some metal right along this edge that I already cleaned up, and then run it to somewhere over here, so that way we have about 2 inches, a little 2-inch trough. And by doing it this way, we are going to keep the clearance that we already have and give the water somewhere to go when it rains, gets wet, or gets washed. So now that we got our template made right here, I want to throw some bead rolls in it just because I think that looks good, and it'll probably help me arch it out just a little bit. Now if you're doing a bead roller, it's important to be aware of which way your hump or little pool area is going to be. I want the hump to be up towards the sky instead of down like a bowl, so that way we can make sure we're not holding water. So I figured that out beforehand, made sure I marked the side that I wanted to put my little pattern on, and I just use the same exact spacing from here to there, and then it'll look good. So let's go ahead and run it. And what I do with the bead roller to make sure that I'm going to roll it out consistent, I do it until as soon as the bead roller is making contact, right there it's making contact, and then I do an additional 2 full turns. So that's 1, that's 2, let's actually do 3. Something like that, 3. So let's roll it. I think we look pretty good. Just trying to feed that line right onto the edge of the wheel and crank away. So as of right now, we have our panel right here, and I went ahead and I threw some paint on it just so that way it's going to be protected from the top side where we can't get to it. So I got my HTP welder, the Pro Pulse, fired up. That's going to come right here, block all that, and then we are going to have to figure out how we are going to, because the water is going to come this way. This needs to be blocked off because we want the water to be directed to over here and eventually go out. So we'll figure that out when we get there. I'm going to go ahead and get that panel tacked in, and we're looking pretty good to go. Alright, so at this point, now that we have water somewhat figured out, now of course I'm going to still have to put cavity wax in there to protect some of that material. Also seam sealer, I'm going to want to epoxy prime that raw metal, but I don't know exactly what else is going to need to be welded to it. What I really need to do next is make sure that I don't have any open space between the cab and the engine bay. Number 1, for a firewall, it needs to be a firewall for a reason, and number 2, I don't want all that hot air getting inside of the cab. So I need to, I think, lift up the cab and get a really good look in there on what I need to do to blend the 2 firewalls together to make it 1 firewall instead of 2 firewalls hanging over from one another. I feel like a lot of the guys that are building cars just for entertainment purposes would have just sat the cab on there, put the front end on, been good to go, and said, oh look, I did this conversion in 1 week. I could have been at that point too, but my focus is I do want to complete the conversion, and I actually want to make it a good vehicle in the end. So we got the slam box right here, body on the frame, and I made these reference points down right there, and I got one right over there as well, just to give me an idea of where the cab needed to go back on the chassis. So on the inside, I needed to pull all this off and put it back together so that way I can have an idea of what I needed to do. Now we can see that the white right there and the cab right there, if I just go ahead and prep out all of that white and then I close in this gap 100%, that's going to seal the inside of the cab off from the engine bay. So now I need to pull this back off again, prep all that white, get that down to bare metal, and it's pretty cool because I'm going to actually be able to still retain defrost, which I didn't know if I'd be able to do that. And then to blend everything together in the end, I have this dash mat that was in the F350, and then I'm probably going to have to cut that right along that seam in order to fit in there seamlessly. Maybe have to make a couple more modifications, but either way, we have a plan. Now we just have to execute it. All right, so now with the car and with the project, we moved 2 steps forward. Now we got to move a couple steps back. So I know this entire edge has to be cleaned because that's what we have to build back together. But as I moved the car, I saw this spot on the ground that I wasn't too fond of, so I wanted to get the car up and look at it and address this as soon as I possibly could, because you can see a dripping water right there. And that's dripping pretty good. Where I've narrowed it down to be leaking from is, I think that the intake manifold right there is leaking. Let's just go ahead and get this addressed really quickly, then we'll keep moving forward. So at this point we have everything off for the intake manifold sitting right here, injectors and all of that stuff. Now if we take a look at the actual motor, see right away that I got this one nice and cleaned out. That's exactly how it looked. Now what's most frustrating about this is I clearly saw that it was leaking from this corner, and you can just see how gnarly that this corner is. So I'm confident that I found my leak pretty nasty. But as I went to take out the last few bolts, I realized that I had a bolt here, one there, one there, one there. The one for this back corner was missing. I also see that the intake manifold itself is not OEM, because the OEM ones have a plastic front cover right here, and that's like a cast aluminum one. So I can tell that it's not stock. So whoever did this job did not put all of the bolts back, and that back corner where it was leaking, the reason why it was leaking is because I was missing a bolt. Maybe I could have just put a bolt there and it would have fixed the problem. But either way, I'm not mad to do some of this routine maintenance while we're doing it. I'm gonna replace all the plugs, get everything cleaned up, put fresh gaskets on there, and it should be running better than ever. Keep in mind, this motor does have 198K on it, so it's probably long overdue for some of this maintenance. So something that kind of sucked turned into something that I should be doing anyways, and it'll make it a lot better in the end. So I'm not that mad. Alright, so as of right now, we have the intake manifold off, the intake, the fuel rail, everything that goes with that, all the spark plugs, the coil pack, that's all over there. I have the tops nice and clean, and I put some tape over it so that way as I'm working on it, I don't get any debris inside the motor itself. Really quickly, I wanted to remind you, Rise and Shine by BodeVision, the meet that I am hosting over in the historic district of Sanford, Florida. That is this Saturday, July 1st, and the first Saturday of every month from here on out. The last one was really good time. I hope to see you at this one if you can make it. I gotta run inside to order a new intake manifold because I want to get this entire thing put back together before I finalize the cab. As the cab sits somewhere in here, I don't want it to be in my way. So we got to do this before we can get to that, and we will do this as soon as possible. So thank you so much for watching. Like this video, comment, subscribe, do all the stuff. You know what it is, YouTube. I'll see you on the next one. I'm out.